3. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear viewers, माइंड ग्रूमर्स का प्लेटफॉर्म और रियलिटी टॉक शो औरंगजेब सोरवर्दी आपके साथ फिर। आज का प्रोग्राम इंटरनेशनल प्रोग्राम है, बिकॉज इन टुडेज प्रोग्राम वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग द रीजनल इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस, particularly the Sri Lanka aspect. And to comment upon this, we will also discuss the pros and cons of developmental sector also, the research also, other economic activities going on in the region. And for that, we have a very important guest right from Sri Lanka, Travis Gomez. Travis, thank you very much for sparing time and coming to our show. Welcome.
Thanks very much for having me. Yeah.
It will be a fun, we will look forward to your wonderful comments, your experiences. So to start the program, kindly tell us, your Pakistani fans and viewers also, and then you will share this video to the Sri Lankan fans also. Kindly tell us about your education, your educational institutes, and what are you doing presently?
Okay. So hi everyone, and thanks for having me on this program. So my name is Travis Gomez. So I basically started my career in basically economics and branching off into finance as well. So just to go in order, I studied at St. Joseph's College for my primary and secondary education. Then for my for A-levels, I did London A-levels at Gateway College, which is like an international school. Then soon after that, I basically started my undergraduate program at a place called Royal Institute of Colombo, which is affiliated with the, it's basically, it conducts programs by the University of London, which conducts these international programs. So it's basically a qualification that is awarded by the University of London with the academic guidance given by the London School of Economics. So I did, it's a 3-year program where I did the BSc in Economics and Finance. So I did that, and soon after I had completed it, I started working in research. So that was something while doing my studies, even though I was mainly focusing on economics, I started getting a liking for finance, where I did a particular competition. This is done by the CFA Institute. This is a program called the Chartered Financial Analyst. It's a professional qualification, and they have this competition amongst university students where you basically have to research a company and give a valuation and give a recommendation for the stock. So I was the leader of that team representing my university. And after that, I became very interested in doing financial research, researching into stocks and giving recommendations. So with that, given that interest, so actually we won the competition at the local level, and we got a chance to represent Sri Lanka at the regional competition in Hong Kong. So that was a really great experience. So with that, I then started my career in this field of financial research. So working at a place called Asia Capital, which is like a local investment bank. So I was working there for 2 years as a financial analyst, both as a financial analyst as well as an economic analyst, where we provided sell-side research to support the brokers and to give investment recommendations. So particularly focusing on like the manufacturing and the diversified companies. So I was working there for about 2 years. Then after that, I decided to focus more on studies as well. So I was doing the CFA program, which is it's a professional qualification, which is like a postgraduate program, which is well recognized in the finance field. So because of that, and I wanted to give more, get more flexibility, to give more time to my studies, I joined a place called Frontier Research, which I currently work at as well. Which is it's a company which is very different, very unique, where it does a lot of its main focus is they provide economic research, which is aimed at a lot of private companies. Because when you think of economic research in Sri Lanka, a lot of them tend to be more like think tanks, and they're kind of focused on giving economic research to or giving like policy recommendations to like governments or NGOs. So we're one of the few companies that is more focused on private companies and giving more practical views on things that are actionable to if you're running a business, the things that matter to you in terms of what's the forecast for the interest rate, for the exchange rate, so that's the area that we're in. So there I was able to it's also very flexible sort of working culture. So we work a lot remotely, even prior to COVID and things like that. It was very normal for us to work remotely. There's only a couple of days people come into work and for meetings. Apart from that, you are free to work at any time. The thing. So it was a very forward-looking company. So I really enjoy my time there, and that's the place I'm still attached to. As a result, yeah. So as a result, I got a very like a diverse set of experiences there. So working in econ, working in like sector.
We will discuss about those experiences, Travis. Thank you very much for explaining all your educational background and where you are working presently. It is really very heartening to know, and a lot of appreciation for you. I would like to ask you now, as a researcher, you are viewing the economic conditions of the developmental sector also, overall Sri Lanka also, the region also. Kindly share with us some of the insights which you have gained in the last 2-3 months regarding the economic condition and how it will move forward, how it will progress further.
Okay. So to help with that, I'll just share my screen as well. I just put together a few slides to help with this. I hope you can see this, the slides as well. So I don't want to make it like a technical session. So just to give it a very broad level. Yeah. So at a very broad level.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can see the screen now. Yeah, thanks. I think just at a very broad level, so my area that I focus on is more on like what are the implications for like sectors and businesses. So I've thought to want to keep it more general to make it something more applicable. And not focus too much on the macroeconomy, because that's not the area that I focus too much on. But at a broad level, I would say this, that right now, in a lot of places there is this debate in respect to how they deal with this pandemic. So in a lot of countries they've implemented things like lockdowns, and where the economy has kind of like been shut down. So in that situation, there is this debate on whether whether do you deal with the health crisis and you take steps to deal with that, or do you deal with the economy, where if things are not if you don't open the economy soon enough, there's a lot of vulnerable groups that they're unable to do their jobs, they're unable to earn a living. There's a lot of vulnerable people that would be affected by this. So you have on the one side the health shock, where people are dying or people are being affected, as well as there's people who are affected by the economy. So the message we want to leave with that is that really you can't really separate the two. Both are very much interconnected. So because if there is if you open up the economy too quickly, and then you go into like a second wave of this pandemic where there's some health concerns, then that might mean that you'll then have to go back into lockdown, and again it's going to affect the economy as a whole. So really, so the way we see economics right now is very much our views. Everything is pretty much driven by understanding this pandemic, and what are the implications of it, when is it going to end, how it will develop. Because really, more than understanding the economic numbers, we feel that is the main concern, really. So right now, we're happy to say in Sri Lanka, we have, in terms of containing the virus, I think we've been fairly successful in terms of, if you look in terms of the numbers. Overall, the cases have been limited to about 2,000, and there's only been like 11 deaths as a result of it. So overall, the government took very proactive steps to deal with that. So that is quite heartening, and now they've been confident to open the economy up, and so far the things have been fairly contained. There hasn't been like a second outbreak and things like that. So overall, it's quite encouraging. But I think a key thing that we should focus on is really the people who are affected by this. So in Sri Lanka, and probably it's the case in a lot of other in regional countries, in the South Asian region, there's a very large informal economy, and a lot of people who are day workers, people who are dependent on their daily wage. So those are a lot of those vulnerable groups are quite affected. So really, a key challenge has been how is the government going to be to develop the to sort of provide those services and the relief measures to them. And really, this pandemic has sort of exposed some of those vulnerabilities that we have. That the moment the economy
Okay.
shut down, how do you get your essentials? So a lot of people who,
Yes.
like, for example, never used like e-commerce, never used like a mobile phone to like pay for their things, have suddenly had to learn these things. So
Okay.
that's something. And but that also gives tells that there's a lot of opportunities as well in this area. And that's something I want to talk about a bit more later on when we get into some of the sectors. But
Okay.
yeah, so right now a lot of concerns has been like, how do you develop, how do you give those benefits to the people? So right now the government has been more limited in terms of what they can do. So because of that, a lot of the burden has been on the central bank and on the banks to provide these relief measures through things like moratoriums, as well as credit guarantee schemes. The government, the central bank, has been reducing the interest rates, pumping in liquidity into the system. So these are some of the approaches that they have been taking with this regard. Uh, so given all of that, so these are all really things to sort of stabilize the situation. But really, I
Okay.
think what we need to understand is that there's a lot of also potential that this pandemic can bring about, not just for Sri Lanka but for the whole region. And I think one thing, a
Yes.
key trend that will emerge, is this regionalization of the value chain. Because what this pandemic has sort of exposed is that, I mean, the trend that
Okay.
has been there for the last couple of years, decades, has been, the way sort of global trade has been developing is like, the companies, global companies, their focus has been on reducing that cost, and therefore going to the cheapest
Okay.
destinations, having like the longest value chains, producing everything in the cheapest countries. But now,
Yes.
because in this context of this pandemic, those have been, all of those vulnerabilities have been exposed. So really what we might see happening is that there will be a shift from what we call a just in time sort of delivery system to a more just in case type of arrangement, where what will happen is more of the production, the manufacturing activities, etc., might be taking place closer to those markets, through the end markets. So because of that, this is really an opportunity for countries in this region as well. So because there might be
Okay.
certain businesses, certain segments which have moved out because of cost considerations. For example, something like in the garments industry. So in Sri Lanka, that's a major industry in Sri Lanka, one of the leading manufacturing sectors, where we've seen in the last couple of years some of that business, some of that activity has been moving out because of cost considerations. But
Okay.
now, given this pandemic, we might see some of those opportunities coming back, where people are worried that they are not able to
Okay.
produce. So that's an opportunity that we have. Another slightly something specific to Sri Lanka is with import substitution. So this is something as a temporary measure some countries might resort to, because in Sri Lanka we have a problem of having a huge debt burden, and because of that causes a lot of pressure on our currency, on our reserves. So something that the
Yes.
government had done to in response to this is they've put bans on a lot of the imports that are coming into Sri Lanka. So particularly a lot of non-essential
Okay.
products like motor vehicles and things like that. They put a ban for 3 months, and right now they have extended that as well as a temporary measure. So you might see some of those kind of more protectionist measures coming into place at the same time as well. So that's something other countries in the region might also be considering, at least in the short run. But I think it's important to remember that these should not be temporary measures.
Okay.
We know overall trade is a positive force, and it does overall improve the what we've seen in Sri Lanka's case as well. The opening up of the economy did have a very significant impact in uplifting people's livelihoods and things like that. So that's I think something we need to focus on. So given that,
Okay.
yes.
Travis, I would like to intervene and ask a few related questions. You have explained in a lot of detail the economic impact, the social impact on Sri Lanka, on region also. Before you move further, I would just like to ask, as a researcher, how do you view all this situation compared to a normal person, normal citizen? What two, three important aspects as a researcher do you see?
Um, yeah, I think the key thing is to understand that. To understand that, uh, I think what this pandemic has also really exposed is that you can't, you need to be prepared for these kind of situations. So there's particularly a quote that we like to, that we sort of always say to our clients, is this quote by Howard Marks. He's a famous fund manager in the US. So he has this quote saying
Okay,
that you can't predict things, you can only prepare for it. So really what
good.
this pandemic is kind of exposed is that there are so many different risks and so many different scenarios that can take place. So really you as
Yes,
a business or you as an individual, when you're planning, when it comes to your planning process, you need to think about all these different things. There are different ways things can pan out. So really when it comes to your thinking, I think that's something very important. So as a researcher, that's something very natural. If you're
great.
doing a stock research on something, you think about what are the different, if you're trying to figure out what is the value of this stock, you think about what
Okay,
are the different scenarios.
yes,
If these things go well, this is the price. If things go bad, this is the price. So
great.
really having that mentality of thinking in scenarios, I would say that's the main thing to keep in mind.
Wonderful. Please continue with your presentation. Very, very informative, wonderfully prepared. Kindly go ahead.
Okay, sure. Just a few things. If I'd like to highlight some of the, given all of these developments, what are
Yeah.
some of the opportunities at a broad sector level that can come up because in this post-COVID world. So I think one is, so I think as a business, when it comes to planning your business and thinking about what are the different opportunities and challenges, I think these are the key three things you need to think about. Whatever
Great.
the type of business that you have, you need to think about, these are some of, we see these are the three frameworks you have to think about. One is
Okay.
behavioral changes. So as a result of COVID, going forward, will this lead to some behavioral changes, or will things go back to the way it was? So we know from the history of different, these pandemics are things that have taken place in history, but after a point it will go away, whether it's whether it'll take maybe it'll take a couple of months, maybe for it to dissipate, but eventually we know things will go back to normal at some point in time. So but then the
Okay.
question is that will this because of this pandemic, has people's behaviors changed? So for
Hmm.
and will it continue into the future? So we saw during these lockdowns and things like that, a lot of people had to now resort to ordering things online. People became much more familiar with e-commerce. Then even when it comes to education, people the schools and the universities quickly started online learning. Even this webinar that we're doing today, these things, Zoom and things, probably things we were not familiar with before, but now it's become very common. Everyone knows what these are, and these are things. So what you need to
Okay.
understand is whether is this a temporary thing? Once things ease, will things go back to where it was, or will this now continue? So that's something you need to assess at your depending on the business you're in. Whether
Okay.
so if things are going to be different, then you need to see how do we change to that, how do you adapt to that. So I think good examples would be in terms of education, and maybe these kind of like online webinars, these events. Maybe going forward, the people
Yes.
have got used to the convenience of having it online, things like that. I mean, there are challenges, but there's also a lot of benefits of it. So maybe going forward, when it comes to an education institute, maybe the students no longer want 100% in person classroom study format. Maybe they want like a
Yes.
mix of it. Maybe some of it can be in person, some of it can be like
Yes.
these online formats. So
Okay.
those are things you need to assess. The other thing is you want to see is what are some of the policies and the regulatory changes that might happen because of this. So what we've seen right now is a lot of countries have like they see like food security is like a big thing. So because of that, they might and having access to this health, the pharmaceuticals and things like that. So a lot of countries might be imposing some policy changes to encourage them. So right now, there's a lot of focus on agriculture and about making sure that there is self-sufficiency in the country, or when it comes to these kind of situations. So there might
Okay.
be some new business opportunities that might come up because of these policy changes that might happen. And I think finally,
Okay. Now, Travis,
yeah.
please continue. Continue.
Yeah, I think finally, just briefly, in terms of the global priorities, might also have now change. So I spoke about that just in time to that just in case type of situation where there might be more regional developments that are happening. I think other things are when it comes to technology and things like that. So I think the main thing that has happened because of this pandemic is, previously we did, I mean, these things like e-commerce, AI, and these are nothing new. These have been there before, but now because of the pandemic, these trends have now sort of accelerated. And
Okay.
in the past before COVID, you might have been a business thinking that okay, I don't need to be on e-commerce, I don't need to have like a social media presence, etc. But now given this, maybe this is now essential for you going forward. This has to be part of your strategy. So those are sort of like the broad things you want to think about.
Wonderful, Travis. It is really enjoyable. I would like to ask you now a related question, but according to the situation in pandemic, what sort of strategies the government of Sri Lanka adopted? Was it the lockdown, or what sort of, or the medical emergency, or anything which you want to say that due to
Okay.
this the pandemic was restricted or it was stopped from spreading further? And second question I want to ask, that still the educational institutes, the universities, colleges, schools, are they open or closed?
So if I just quickly talk to you about the second point, yes. So from this week, they have started reopening schools. So at the moment it's only for the higher grades, and they'll be phasing it out where later for like the lower grades they will be opening schools as well. But I think what has been very encouraging though is even during this period when the lockdown happened, in the first few weeks, the schools and the university, they were a bit lost in terms of what to do next. But it's really encouraging that even when it comes to state schools, who don't have a lot of resources, they manage to like pull things together where pretty much all across most of the streams, everyone has been having like online learning and like very effectively as well based on the feedback that we've been getting. So that has been very encouraging that these kind of things have happened. In terms of the measures taken by the government, I think a lot of credit should be given to in terms of they acted very decisively when it was in the early days, where they imposed very strict lockdowns and they closed the airport, and anyone who was coming in, they were sent to these isolated quarantine centers. So really, the government took a very sort of like because very much led by the president as well. The president, given his background coming from a more military background, he kind of saw this as sort of like a military operation, like a against COVID. So because of that, a lot of the armed forces were used, and they were very much involved in the fight in the fight against COVID. So given that, so actually because of that, because they took very decisive measures, the spread of COVID within the communities has been very limited. Most of the COVID cases has been from people who've been returning from abroad, and they've been dealing with them in a very systematic way, where they've been sent to quarantine centers.
Okay.
A lot of them, they have been the government, the armed forces have been following up with them. So really, I think that has been in terms of on the health side, that has been the main way that they've been dealing with this. On the economic side, I think a lot of the burden has been with the central bank and the bank system, where these businesses that are stuck, where they've been struggling for cash for their working capital and all. What they've been doing is the central bank has been giving moratoriums on their loans and deferring the interest payments, as well as giving cheap working capital loans at like low rates and guaranteeing some of those things. So I think that's what the central bank has been doing to keep the businesses afloat. Yeah.
That's great. What about the universities and colleges and schools? Are they open or closed?
So the schools have, so for the higher grades, they've just opened this week, and in the future they are planning to open it up for the lower grades as well. So in a systematic way, they've been doing this. Yeah.
Now, there is a time once I would really like to ask you that any young boy or girl from Pakistan or Sri Lanka, if they want to study economics, and want to pursue their career in developmental sector or in research, what will you advise to them? What sort of study they should do? What sort of skills they should build in?
Okay. So I think the important thing is just drawing from my own experiences. So I studied, in terms of what I studied was in economics and finance. But the type of things I've worked on, the type of different things I've been working on, it's much more diverse. It's going much more beyond what you learn in a textbook in economics and finance. And really, in our field, when it comes to research, the most important thing really is having that soft skills, because you might have all the technical knowledge to do this valuation, do all the technical work, but if if you can't communicate that to your end client, if you're dealing with a busy say a businessman or someone from a top corporate, they don't have time to read all these like huge reports and things like that. They want something in an easy to understand format. So your ability to communicate that effectively in a presentation or in a report, and that is really, I think, what is important. So really, I would say you have the technical skills on the side, but really the main focus that you really want to develop all the time is those soft skills, your presentation skills and your report writing skills. I think that is something, because the way things are changing right now, you can't be stuck in one field, or you just having the technical knowledge is no longer enough. You need to be able to adapt to the situation. So really the soft skills is really what links everything together. And I mean, the great thing that we have right now is there's a lot of online resources which are even freely available, which provides a lot of this. So really there is no excuse that there's no barrier for you to learn these things. So that's what I would really encourage everyone to pursue. Yeah, whatever field you're in. Yeah.
Moreover, what sort of universities, colleges, modern education? I also visited one of the universities in Colombo once I visited Sri Lanka. What all opportunities are emerging in the education sector for young boys and girls of Sri Lanka to pursue their careers and go for the international jobs and assignments?
Okay. Yeah, so education is also one of those fields where there's a lot of activity and potential in Sri Lanka. So we're seeing a lot more like foreign affiliated universities setting up, or these programs where you do a couple of years in Sri Lanka and then you can transfer to a foreign university. So I think that's a positive development. So there's a lot of potential there, and I think the other thing is that a lot of universities, an encouraging thing is a lot of these, the top universities around the world have been like offering their courses online as well. So really, I would say that you don't need to limit yourself to what's available in the country that you're in, because there is enough opportunities out there that you can learn online. And really now with the pandemic, I think this will probably, I think now it's made clear that this is now the future direction that we need to go into. There will be more, there will be a place for, in-person learning, going to universities, because there's a lot of other like skills that you learn around going to a campus style university. But, when it comes to like acquiring knowledge, improving your technical skills, there is other options available to you, which is not just limited to where you are. So I think overall that's a very encouraging development, and hope that would trend would definitely continue.
Travis, I personally like economics and this developmental sector very much. So I have been doing some assignments also regarding this. Very close to my heart. One, because of you, and second, because of economics and the developmental sector. Do you think that after this pandemic, the UNO jobs or other NGO jobs will emerge more and more, offering more opportunities, or they will just be restricted?
Definitely, I think, particularly in the development field, I think there is a lot of scope, because right now, what this pandemic has also exposed is that there's a lot of vulnerable groups out there. And, a challenge even for the government in Sri Lanka has been reaching those. A lot of these people, they are like, they don't have bank accounts. A lot of them are like, they are not in the traditional safety nets that are out there. So really, a lot more work can be done on the development side. So particularly an area in Sri Lanka that is there's a lot of potential is in the agriculture field, because right now there's a lot of people, like 1/3 of the labor force is in the agriculture sector. But there isn't, but the productivity is very low, and people are like trapped in agriculture. They're not able to go beyond to further areas. So really, that's a sector where there's a lot of like research has to go into that, how to introduce these new technologies that can improve the yields of those crops, etc. So yeah, I would say the development field has a lot of potential. Yeah. And same thing goes with economics as well, because right now people are sort of rethinking, these economic models. So far the trend has been, going for very liberal trade policy and very sort of like free market sort of systems. But now there's also people are now questioning that, and in the context of things like technological changes, where people might be out of jobs, or there's a lot of development. So there are new concepts that are coming up, which again, there's a lot of new areas of research that are opening up in that field as well.
That's really great, Travis. So, dear viewers, this was Travis, a very, very promising economist from Sri Lanka. उन्होंने न सिर्फ रीजनल इकोनॉमिक सिचुएशन को डिस्कस किया, बल्कि श्रीलंका की हुकूमत के इकदामात को भी डिस्कस किया जो उन्होंने कोविड-19 के दौरान किए। उसके बाद डेवलपमेंटल सेक्टर का पूरा एनालिसिस किया, यंग बॉयज एंड गर्ल्स के लिए क्या अपॉर्चुनिटीज अवेलेबल हैं इकोनॉमिक्स के हवाले से, डेवलपमेंटल सेक्टर के हवाले से उस पे बात हुई। बहुत खूबसूरत डिस्कशन उन्होंने की। ट्रेविस, वी all are really thankful to you, all the Pakistani viewers, and especially me. Thank you very much for joining with us. Inshallah, we'll call you again in the next program after some time to discuss further issues. But presently, thank you very much. We are closing the program. Before we close, any message for your Pakistani viewers?
Thanks very much for having me. I think the message overall is that we should not because right now I think a lot of people have been like very fearful of like the pandemic, and a lot of people are like a lot of uncertainties about the future. But really, I think you should see, because looking at history as well, a lot of these pandemics have also been periods where there's been very huge, very significant developments that have taken place in terms of innovation, in terms of new arts and culture, in terms of technology. So really, we should see this as an opportunity and make the maximum use of it. So yeah, and wish everyone all the best. And
So that's it. Thank you very much, Travis. All the Pakistani viewers and me, they extend lot of heartiest facilitation to all the Sri Lankan people. To you, thank you very much for being with us. We close the program. Pakistan, Zindabad, and we wish prosperity for Sri Lanka also. Thank you very much and goodbye.